If you are just joining us, I am discussing our global state of affairs. Again, while it is important to highlight our heritage, our connections, and various lessons, it is equally important to assess where we are now as a global people. Indeed, it is especially critical to examine what are the impediments to our progress. After all, we have been survivors and overcomers for the last 400 years of various states of abject degradation. This episode will pointedly discuss the issues preventing us from thriving and taking our place on the world stage of history, culture, and policy making by examining the writings of historical and contemporary scholars. The writings of the late Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III, psychologist, Egyptologist, historian, and my beloved mentor, Dr. Hakeem Mahabudi, author, poet, educator, publisher, and one of my early mentors, and Dr. Anthony Tony Browder, cultural historian, author, publisher, artist, and my esteemed colleague in this work, continue the foundation work of Drs. Carter G. Woodson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King, Ivan Van Sertima, and freedom fighters such as Amilcar Cabral and Drs. Kwame Nkrumah, Kariama Welsh, Michere Gethe Mugo. All of these exceptional men and women of scholar activism have worked in the liberation vineyard in the United States, Europe, Africa, and beyond. Education of self has been a cornerstone in all of their work for our empowerment. All have been recognized for their incredible contributions to forwarding knowledge intended to develop, grow, and empower our communities. Let me start with the African concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are. A powerful concept forwarded by Bishop Desmond Tutu and Dr. Michere Mugo, among others. Ubuntu emphatically implies that our history and culture is an imperative requirement. The writings of Drs. Woodson, Du Bois, King, Hilliard, and Malcolm have made it abundantly clear that our miseducation is a major stumbling block to our progress. In order to grow in the way of Ubuntu, we must teach our heritage to our children. Our failure to do so continues the tragic trajectory we are currently on to the benefit of white supremacy. That is, we no longer see our collective selves in each other, lost and caught up in the deepening isfet, chaos and confusion of contemporary Western life. The thought of this reminds me of Baba Asa's depressing assessment of education as we know it today. And I quote, "There is something dreadfully wrong with an education socialization process that leaves us ignorant of our past, strangers to our people, apes of our oppressors, and creatures of habitual, shallow thought and trivial values." While ignorance of our past is obvious, with incomplete school curriculums, the idea of strangers to our people is less so. The connection to others that look like us beyond nationality was severed, and today it is not a natural affinity amongst us. We are the only people who do not readily see ourselves in each other, assisting in our disunity and disconnection as a people to our dire detriment. Most unfortunately, the land of shallow thought and trivial values is the place where too many of our people live. This particular impairment shows up as materialism and an overemphasis on appearance. I'm talking spending millions on hair, nails, eyelashes, clothes, shoes, sneakers, etc., etc., enhancing and enriching the oppressor at our expense once again. Additionally, we are a well-entertained people versus the inner attainment to be found in studying and reading the wisdom of our ancestors. Please understand that the solutions are accessible to us, but we must acquire the will to implement solutions in our daily conscious actions, especially when deciding when, where, and with whom we spend our hard-earned resources. But I digress. One really cannot talk about miseducation without acknowledging the groundbreaking work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Scholar, writer, activist, publisher, Woodson holds the rightful title of Father of Black History, having established Black History Month in 1926. His book, The Miseducation of the Negro, written in 1933, could have been written yesterday. In particular, in the introduction to this seminal text, Woodson writes, and I quote, "No systematic effort towards change has been possible for taught the same economics, history, philosophy, literature, and religion, which have established the present code of morals. The Negro's mind has been brought under the control of the oppressor. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to control his actions. The problem of holding the Negro down, therefore, is easily solved." End quote. Tragically, today our miseducation is facilitated by a colonized curriculum steeped in Eurocentric history, culture, and values with very little Black history that is taught in a manner that is relevant or empowering. This is a major issue. We cannot continue to cheat our children of self-knowledge and expect them to love and grow themselves to their full potential. Or to be brutally clear, why would we expect the people who treated us wrong to teach our children right? I'm just saying. Woodson's profound work laid the groundwork for a plethora of scholars researching and writing on this critical aspect of a people's well-being, as well as inspiring my own work. In fact, the purpose of the entire African-centered project was to address the issues raised in Woodson's conception of miseducation and Du Bois's theory of double consciousness, looking at ourselves through the eyes of the oppressor and not liking what we see. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, like Woodson, wanted us and our face, or rather warned us, told us in an address entitled Whither Now and Why. Delivered in 1960, he exhorted us not to neglect to develop our own ideals. He prophetically predicted the consequences of this neglect, saying, and I quote, "That would mean that we would cease to be Negroes as such and become white in action, if not completely in color. We would take on the culture of white Americans doing as they do, thinking as they think." End quote. OMG. We all know Oreo cookies, people who look Black but think and act white, having embraced white culture in their way of moving in the world. Too often, these miseducated individuals will tell you that race consciousness is identity politics. Racism is over, and you are too Black. They certainly want nothing to do with learning about our true history. These are the folks who are part of the I Ain't Africa Club. They have traveled everywhere in the world but Africa. They think the motherland has nothing to offer and have no interest and often a disdain for all things African. Worse, many of these people tend not to be advocates for our people in the places where they could be of service. While they would deny that this is an expression of self-hatred, the sad fact is they cannot be counted on to uplift our communities. Or to quote Dr. Woodson, who always told the brutal truth, these Negroes are all but worthless in the development of their people. End quote. We'll be right back.